Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi. My name is Ameya Pawar. I'm running for governor. I'm currently the alderman of the 47th Ward in the city of Chicago. I threw my hat in the ring in January for the Democratic nomination simply because I believe in social justice, I believe in equity, I believe in fairness. But if we elect people who hate the institutions they seek to represent, if we elect people who hate government, well then you're not going to get a government that reflects the values that I believe most people share.
Right.
And I've always believed that government is a force for good. I believe government is aspirational. Because, quite frankly, government is you, it's me, it's us coming together, forging a contract with one another, and saying that we're going to take care of one another. But if we elect people who pit us against one another based on where we live and what we do for a living, we're on a race to the bottom, and that race is going to continue to accelerate. And it's time to reject the politics of this idea where it's okay now to pick on the salaries of a carpenter or a teacher or a union plumber. And that is okay. But if you call out the inequities of a tax code that allows someone like Bruce Rauner, who makes $200 million a year, to pay a fraction of what everyone else does, if you say that, then you're some sort of raging communist. But if you call out the salaries of a teacher, then that's okay to them. And that's not all right. We need to reject that. So I threw my hat in the ring based on the experience of my own family. So I'm going to first tell you a little bit about my dad. I'm a first-generation American. My parents are from India. But my dad was born under British rule. And what's important about that is that the British were few and very wealthy. The Indians were many and were kept poor. And what the British did to hold on to power was they picked countrymen, people who would naturally be allies, against one another based on language, based on class, based on what they did for a living, based on where they lived. And that's textbook divide and rule. Think about what's happening in this country. We have a divide between rural and urban areas. That is a false dichotomy. It should not exist. It's not real. But all we end up doing in this country is, especially in the state with divide and rule, is fight one another over scraps. And that's how you get to a place where our current governor decides that he wants to run against Chicago, yet he represents Chicago, because this idea that everyone is not getting their fair share because one city gets more than they should. And then he goes around the state and pits other communities against one another. That's how you end up in a place where universities in red and blue areas are on the verge of closing and not knowing whether they can open in the fall. You have school districts that might close early this year and don't know how they're going to open in the fall. This is immoral. This is not the way our society is supposed to be.
They are closing. They're taking furlough pay.
Yeah, they are closing. This is immoral. I bring up my dad and his story on divide and rule because I compare that to Bruce Rauner. What he's doing is textbook divide and rule. The thing is, he needs institutions to fail. He needs institutions to be in chaos. He needs it to be about anything other than himself so he can put blame on someone. And then his blame is, it's those unions. If only those unions went away, everyone else would do well. Tell me one time in history where hurting one group of working people helps working people. I can't think of one. So if we can either allow wealthy people who don't like government to divide us, or we can unite around the issues that are common to all of us. And so our campaign, what we call, is a new deal for Illinois. It's a new deal between your state government and you. And it rests on 4 key planks. The first one is on public education. We cannot keep relying on property taxes as the way to pay for public education. That's how you end up with a few enclaves being able to spend $20,000, $25,000 per year, and pretty much everyone else around the state spends half of that. So if you're serious about lifting all boats and making sure that everyone has an opportunity in the middle class, well then we have to tax progressively. And that means moving away from property taxes, which are regressive, Because I know that just because your home value went up and your taxes went up doesn't mean you have more money. But if your income goes up, that should be what would be taxed. The second plank is universal child care. And I'm going to sum that up very quickly. If we say we value families, and if we say we actually have family values, then we have to actually value them. And we have to take care of families. And that means recognizing that for lots of working families around the state, regardless of where they live, the cost of child care is cost prohibitive, such that people have to leave work. And that almost always condemns families to their current economic station. And it most often asks women to leave the workforce early. And then most of the times, the families actually need that second income. In some cases, that's only income. The third plank is a real jobs and capital bill. And this is where it connects back to the original New Deal and what we did after the Depression. See, during the Depression, we had 30% of Illinois out of work. 90% of kids in rural counties were malnourished. And the response to an economy that was totally out of whack, where it favored the few, FDR decided we're going to invest in communities, make massive public investments in public infrastructure, using the public to build those investments. And here we are, 3 generations later, we're still enjoying them. We built national parks. We built libraries and schools. These are the same projects that we need to move on in the communities today. So the Rural Electrification Administration brought power and water to small communities. We need to bring reliable internet access to small towns. There are all these projects around the state that need to be funded, that can pay a living wage, that can expand our trades, and actually put people back to work and combat automation, combat jobs that have left communities because of globalization and trade. And then the fourth plank we talk about because we haven't invested in the first 3. If we invested in schools, if we invested in families, and if we invested in jobs, then we wouldn't have to talk about criminal justice reform. But we have to talk about it because we haven't done the first 3. We send too many black and brown kids to jail for low-level drug offenses, and that's got to stop. We have to seriously think about providing services in people's communities and create opportunity so that we're not tagging people with felonies and condemning them to a life of poverty. And that means providing mental health care in communities, providing social services, and actually passing a budget. I'm going to leave you with this. So when I think about divide and rule, I see it every day at home when I see my dad. My dad was 5 years old when India gained independence. But the legacy of colonial rule and pitting people against one another is what I see when I see him. Because my dad grew up in a home without electricity or water. He had typhoid as a young boy. His family had to live off of rations. He was literally starving and sick and growing up. That left him standing at 5'2", because he didn't grow to his full potential. Now, I'm 6 feet tall in one generation because I had food to eat, and I grew up here, and I grew up in Illinois, and I had access to primary medical care. I had all the things he didn't. Now, I say all this is because this is tangible, it's real. I see the impacts of divide and rule. There's no reason why we should be pitting ourselves against one another. All of the things I talked about cost money. But that means that everyone needs to pay their fair share, and you can't keep burdening the middle class to pay for everything. It means that the wealthy have to pay their fair share. It also means that I don't think that wealth is bad. Wealth and success are sometimes synonymous, but not all the time. There are lots of people who are not wealthy that are very successful. All I'm asking is that we stop worshiping wealth. And if we stop worshiping wealth, we can end up with a society, one that lives up to our full potential, and most importantly, create a new deal for the 21st century between ourselves. Because that's fundamentally all government is, like I said at the beginning. Government is you, it's me, it's our job to take care of one another, whether you live in a big town, a small town, or a major city. We're one state. Don't let a few people pit us against one another. That's why I threw my hat in the ring for governor, and I hope that you'll join our campaign. Thank you.